Lori asked, I'm so overwhelmed by the task list in my brain that I don't know how to get it out and into Asana or onto paper. What should I do?
Okay, when you're super overwhelmed with all of the tasks flying around in your brain, I call them brain flies, right? And even one brain fly can be super annoying and distracting, but there are people who have like what I call like an attack of brain flies. I would say the first thing to do is do a brain dump, but know that this is going to be a multi-stage process. Stage one, get it all out. Just dump it. Think about that very much as like a sewer. It's a pretty ugly soup. So what we're going to do to clean it up is then we're going to move that sort of like sewage and we're going to separate it into like the good stuff and the not so good stuff. What you want to do is you want to move everything that is eminently actionable in the next month over to your to-do list. Meaning I need to take action on this eminently over on the next month. That goes on your to-do list. You'll realize that some things that that were those brain flies weren't actually a task. It was more of an outcome, like a priority. You want to consider putting those onto your life map, right? So maybe you realize, oh, this thing has to be done, but it really is a priority more than a task. You know, the difference between a priority and a task is a priority always breaks down into a task. So priority is usually an outcome. I want to achieve this thing. Okay, that goes on your life map. What are the 5 things I need to do to achieve that thing? That goes on your to-do list, right? So just a quick thing on that. And then there's going to be a bunch of things left over that like I jokingly call learn Swedish, right? These things that you've always wanted to do, but they aren't imminently actionable in a month and they're not aligned to any important milestones that are getting you to really critical places. It's just an idle thought that came into your brain because you know, oh, I have Swedish roots and one day I want to go there and I should start learning Swedish. That should go on your someday list. So what you should do is start with a big, ugly sewage list, move the things that are actionable in the next month or connected to a leverage priority, move those on your to-do list, move anything that's just a milestone onto your life map, and then everything else should go onto your someday list. Now, you may say, well, then my someday list is going to be this really ugly, messy sort of like place that I just vomit things that are never going to get done. So how do I operate my someday list? I have a project in Asana called Someday. I go in there to vomit, like if there's something I realize isn't really crucial, I'll move it on there, or I'll go in there to, if I've got a blood brain flies, I'll vomit it out into my Someday list. And then once a month, I have a recurring Asana task that reminds me to go check it. I'll go there and I'll look. And usually what happens is there's a bunch of things that I thought were super important at the time. And when I say I thought they were super important, I'm talking about the kind of stuff that wakes me up in the middle of the night. It feels like such a good idea. And I write it, oh my God, this is the best idea in the world. And when it happens to me, I can tell you the lived experience to me is, Demir, you are a genius. You've just solved the world's problems. This is gonna be the thing. This is it, Demir. This is the thing that solves it all. And then I look at it on my someday list 3 months later, I'm like, X, like I cannot for the life of me remember why I thought that thing was so amazing. It really is not that amazing. And then there's like, you know, another maybe 5% where I'm like, oh, actually, it's time to do this thing now. This thing has now become relevant. Like my business and my life has progressed to the point where it's now I can take this thing off the someday list and I can actually give it a date and a time because it's now time to do this. And then the rest are what I call like dragging the dead bodies behind the truck. These poor tasks, I just sort of drag them. And every month I look at them and I keep dragging the sort of poor, mangled, lifeless bodies behind like me. And I keep looking at them and they keep saying, please do me. And I say, oh, not quite now. And then finally a year later, I have pity on them and I say, okay, and now I'll give you a decent burial because this is inhuman what I'm doing to you. Like I feel sorry for these tasks now that I've dragged them. What I need from my someday list is I am not emotionally ready to admit to myself, or I don't have the perspective yet to know which of these tasks should get done and which don't, or I'm not brave enough to cut them off my task list yet. So it's a place where I can store them and hold them. It's like a purgatory where I can store them and hold them. And yes, like 5% of them ultimately come out of purgatory and get action taken, but 95% of them just get dragged behind the truck until I'm ready to cut them loose and just admit to myself that they're not going to get done, right? I've used this example a lot. Learning Spanish. I live in South America, people. I'm actually really good at speaking languages. Every year, number one on my someday list is learn Spanish in capital letters. Dude, you live in Latin America. It is unacceptable that you aren't like amazing at Spanish. And yet every year there were other things that were higher priority. And here I am, now we're moving. It's gonna be 8 years that we spent front to back. And my Spanish is like, I mean, I can speak some Spanish, but honestly, it's shameful. Considering that I've been here 8 years, it's a shameful level of Spanish that I speak right now. And I just had to get to the point where I had to mourn it and accept it. But then I have to get perspective and say like, but we built a 7-figure business. You know, we bought our properties free and clear. We're debt free. We've got 2 kids, right? Like you have to look at your perspective and be like, okay, you got all of these other cash and prizes in life that you were going for, but you didn't learn Spanish. Can you live with that? And my answer was, I can live with it. I can live with that. And we have to be courageous and bold in saying, I'm not going to, like, my life is turning out such that I will not ever speak Spanish fluent. That is where my life is going. It's not where I wanted it to go, but that is where, can I boldly choose that and say, now I accept and choose I am not ever going to be an amazing Spanish speaker. And I'll just move on to the other things, because the things that remain possible, there's still an infinite level of possibility remaining in my life. Meaning more doors are closing than are opening every year that I live life. And yet the doors that remain open are essentially an infinite universe, right? So I have to start getting into acceptance around what is becoming possible for me, not what is not becoming possible for me, if that makes any sense for you, right?
Totally. How much lighter do you feel when you actually let that go, right?
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up. Like you fight the feeling and you fight it and you fight it, and you just, because it conflicts with how you see your world. I had a world view that it would not be possible for me to move to a country and not master that language. And when that worldview was violated, I was fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. But when I finally accepted it, I actually felt 1,000,000 pounds lighter. Okay, that's not gonna happen. Moving on. And you realize it was just part of your ego. What do I need Spanish? My wife doesn't speak Spanish. I don't do business in Spanish. My kids speak Spanish, but they also speak fluent English, so they don't need me to speak Spanish. So what was it all about? Ultimately, it was just about ego. It really wasn't. If I look at my life map, learning Spanish didn't have anything to do with anything that was on my life map. And that's why it didn't get prioritized. And that's why ultimately I had to just let it die. One of the things that I do really well that I'd love for all of my clients to do is I disassociate from my tasks. Meaning, a lot of people will see 50 tasks on their task list and they say, those tasks are me, I am those tasks. If those tasks don't get done, I have failed, right? Like they are fully associated with their tasks. I think about them like these, like I'm like a Roman emperor, like sitting with my, like there's somebody's like feeding me grapes. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching all of the gladiators in the arena. And I've got my favorite gladiators, the ones that I want to win. And I say, oh, good, I hope that they win, and this would be great, But if they don't win, I don't see it as being my deficiency or my default, right? Like, so I make my tasks like go into the arena of life and fight each other. And if one shouldn't win in that battle, I don't blame myself. In fact, I sort of had this attitude like, oh man, I was rooting for you, bud. I look at Spanish and I'm like, God, man, I was really rooting for you. But I don't see it as my defect that didn't happen. I made it do glorious battle with all of the other things that wanted my time, energy, and attention. And ultimately, by following my life map and by staying true to my North Star, this gladiator that I was rooting for just didn't make it through the arena. So I sort of, sorry, buddy. I don't associate it as my failure. I just think, you didn't make it. So I think that disassociation from our task can be a really healthy thing because it can give us the space to exist more at the 5,000 foot level and have the perspective to be like, as much as I wanted that one to win, it didn't. Not my fault. It did glorious battle and it couldn't justify its own existence. In the Darwinian battle that is a competition for your time, energy, and attention, it didn't win.